Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hi MCT. I'm so glad that I was finally able to send you my story. I hope that you are able to read it though. I'm Carla, a 35-year-old single mom living in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ontario, Canada. I have two wonderful kids, Emma, who's 8, and Jack, who's 5. My life has been a roller coaster, but nothing prepared me for the nightmare that unfolded over the past few months. I want to share my story to hopefully warn others and maybe find some peace in the process. I was married to my ex-husband Mark for nearly 10 years. In the beginning, things were really good. But over time, his behavior changed. He became controlling and eventually abusive. I tried to make it work for the sake of our children, but I couldn't put them or myself through it any longer. About a year ago, I filed for divorce after he shoved me during an argument. It was one of the hardest decisions that I have ever made, but I knew that it was the right one. For a while, things were relatively quiet. I focused on my kids and my job as a receptionist at the local medical clinic. Life started to feel normal again. But then, about 3 months ago, I started noticing Mark's car parked near my house. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was in the area, I told myself. But then it became more frequent. Every time that I left for work or came home, his car was there, parked a few houses down the street. One evening, I was putting Emma and Jack to bed when my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. It said, Carla, please talk to me. I miss you. We can make it work, you know? I felt a shiver run down my spine. I knew it was Mark. I ignored the message and I blocked the number, hoping that that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. The messages kept coming from different numbers. Some were desperate pleas for reconciliation, while others were much darker. Things like, if you don't talk to me, you'll regret it. And another one said, I'll make you pay for keeping my kids from me. I saved every message and showed them to the police, but they told me that there wasn't much that they could do unless he really does something to me or the kids. Crazy, right? Mark would be at my workplace more often now. He would sit in his car across the street, just watching the entrance. My coworkers noticed and asked if everything was okay. I didn't want to worry them, and it's really not their business, so I downplayed it. But inside, I was terrified. I couldn't focus on my work, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to show up. One day, I was leaving the clinic when I saw him standing by my car. My heart raced as I approached. Carla, please, just talk to me. I only want to see my kids, okay? He said, his voice a disturbing mix of anger and desperation. Mark, you need to leave. You're not supposed to be here, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He took a step closer, and I could feel the panic rising. You're making a mistake. We belong together, he said, his eyes narrowing. I managed to get into my car and lock the doors, and I drove straight to the police station and filed another report. They promised to increase patrols near my house and workplace, and they said that they would talk to him, but I still felt vulnerable. A few nights later, I was awoken by a noise downstairs. My heart pounded as I grabbed my phone and I crept out of bed. I could hear someone moving around in the living room. I dialed 911, whispering to the operator that someone was in my house. I silently went to check on Emma and Jack, who were thankfully still sound asleep. I locked us in the bedroom and waited. my heart in my throat. But now, I could hear Mark's voice. It was low and menacing as he was calling out for me. I heard his voice starting to get louder and louder, meaning he was getting closer. But the police arrived just in time, bursting through the front door and arresting him. He was taken away in handcuffs, screaming that he loved me and that I was ruining everything. The next day, I filed charges against him for breaking and entering and harassment, and that I wanted to get a restraining order. There's a court date set for next month and I'm scared, but I know that this is the right thing to do. My children and I deserve to live in peace without the constant fear of being watched or threatened. I'm sharing my story as a reminder to trust your instincts and take action if you are in a similar situation. No one deserves to live in fear. Be safe, everyone. I have no clue if this counts as sexual assault, but I gave it a content warning just to be sure. And just to clarify, these are 2 separate encounters in the same day and 2 different guys. It was a nice day out today and I didn't want to waste money on DoorDash, so I figured why not walk to a nearby restaurant. It's 20 minutes walking distance from my house and I wanted to get my steps in. I wore shorts and a shirt since it was 70 degrees that day. I made a pit stop at the smoke shop, and this was my first encounter with a guy who doesn't fucking understand the word no. He stops me as I'm passing by him and he asks what my name is. I tell him, and then he asks for my number, so I said, "Oh, no thank you, I'm not interested." But he then introduces himself and tells me how old he is, then asks for my number again. I repeat once again, "No thank you, I'm not interested." And he's still persistent. Then he finally asks to put his number in my phone. I figured that he can put his number in and I can block him when I get home. I just wanted him to leave me alone, so I let him put his number in and he then tells me to have a good day and we go our separate ways. I tell my boyfriend about this encounter and he tells me that I should have gave the guy his number instead. I make my way to the restaurant. As I'm passing some street, I'm walking briskly trying to get there and back, and this guy notices me. I didn't even have to look at him to feel it. I did not have to even turn around to feel his eyes watching me. I did not have to turn around to know that he got in his car and started following me as I walked. It's almost like my body was alerting me of this rather than my brain did, because I was not comprehending the situation at all. I turn my headphones down and I hear him yelling after me, "Yo!" repeatedly trying to get my attention. I just ignore him and I keep walking. But this is when he gets in his car and starts following me, still trying to get my attention. He then pulls his car in front of me, kind of blocking my path. I see him in front of me and I get a sick feeling inside, one that I won't ever forget. And then this guy waves at me in the creepiest way possible, like a predator catching his prey or something. He then tries to get me to come to his car, and I shake my head and wave him off, and I'm saying, "No thank you, I'm not interested." And then he mumbles all kinds of shit like, "You're so beautiful. What's your name? Are you in a relationship?" And all kinds of bullshit like that. I'm frozen for a second looking at him. But then, I look down and I see that his dick is out. He just has it in his hand and wiggling it around. I see this, and immediately my legs start moving without my brain having to tell them to. Literally as if they had a mind of their own. I remember my mind going completely blank, and I didn't register this encounter as danger until I was walking away, reaching in my bag for my pepper spray, and my hand shaking to call my boyfriend, but I did not stop moving. Luckily, The guy sped off and didn't follow me after. I made it to the restaurant, but I was too scared to walk back home, so I called an Uber. This has never happened to me before. I know it doesn't seem like much, but the whole thing was terrifying, and I keep thinking back on how my life could have been drastically altered in that moment in so many ways. Luckily, my body reacted way before my brain did, and I got myself the hell out of there without even thinking about it. Every time I think about it, my heart starts racing. I didn't get his license plate because I was literally just so shocked and was just focused on getting to a safe area away from him. I wish I would have stayed home and ate my cereal. I'm scared to even walk anywhere else, even across the street like I usually do. This literally ruined everything for me. Just a reminder of how you're never truly safe, no matter where you are. Please be careful and pay attention to your surroundings, and don't give these weirdos the time of day. I just saw a TikTok about how certain butterflies mean certain things. And now that I think about it, I kept seeing a white butterfly in my backyard outside my room window before I left. Then, I had another one following me as I was walking from the smoke shop, but I didn't think much of it at that time because, I don't know, they said it means ancestors watching over you, but who knows really. My point still stands though. Pay attention to what and who is around you. My name is not important for this story, but know that I'm a 30-year-old freelance illustrator living in a cozy apartment complex in the heart of the city of Cebu. For those who don't know, Cebu is located in the Philippines. My building is full of quirky characters, but it always felt safe for a single woman like me. Until recently. I want to share my story here in the hope that it might help someone else. I moved into my apartment about a year ago, and it's been my little sanctuary ever since. The building is old but charming, with creaky wooden floors and lots of natural light. My neighbors seem friendly enough, especially Mr. Rodrigo. He's the elderly man who lived across the hall from me. He was always helpful, offering to carry my groceries or water my plants when I traveled for work. He was a retired professor from a university here that I know of. I thought he was just a sweet old man looking out for me, but I was so wrong. A few months ago, I started noticing little things out of place in my apartment. At first, it was small stuff. My keys moved from one spot to another. A book that I didn't remember taking off the shelf suddenly just appearing on my coffee table. I chalked it up to my own forgetfulness. Freelancing can be hectic, and I often work late into the night, so I assumed that I was just tired and I was losing track of things. But then I started finding small gifts around my apartment, a bouquet of flowers on my kitchen counter, a box of chocolates on my coffee table. I didn't think much of it though. I just assumed that they were from a friend or an admirer who had somehow gotten access to my apartment. I know. I should have been freaking out and calling the police or something, but I genuinely didn't want to think negatively about the situation. Maybe I was just naive, I guess. But when I ask around, none of my friends or coworkers or even family members claim responsibility. One of my friends said, "Kahadlok ana oy. Unsa palay gipanghilabtan ana niya sa imong balay? Pag-ilis og lock." Which translates to, "That's so scary. Imagine the things that person touches in your house. Go change your locks." And that's when the unease began to set in. One evening, I came home from a late-night illustration session at a nearby cafe to find my door slightly ajar. My heart raced as I pushed it open, half expecting to find a burglar inside. But there was no one. Instead, I found a beautifully wrapped gift box on my dining table. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small note that says, "To you with love." I was terrified. Someone had been in my apartment again, and I had no idea who. I called the building management the next day, but they dismissed my concerns, saying that there was no sign of forced entry and it was probably just a prank. That's just horrible management. So that's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I bought a small, discreet camera and I set it up in my living room, pointing towards the front door. A few days later, I went out for a late night walk, leaving the camera recording. When I returned, everything seemed normal. But when I reviewed the footage, my blood ran cold. There, clear as day, Mr. Rodrigo using a spare key to enter my apartment. He walked around, touching my things, leaving another small gift on my coffee table. And the most chilling part was how calm and methodical he seemed, as if he had done this so many times before. Where he got a copy of my key, I have no idea. I took the footage to the police, who were also shocked and took immediate action. Mr. Rodrigo was arrested and charged with trespassing and harassment. He was also evicted from the apartment complex. And for a brief moment, I felt a sense of relief, but it was short-lived. Despite Mr. Rodrigo's arrest, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My apartment, which had once been my haven, now felt like a prison to me. I wanted to move out, but I couldn't afford to break my lease. Freelancing doesn't pay much, and I had already stretched out my budget to secure this place. So I just stayed, constantly looking over my shoulder and jumping at every little noise. Mr. Rogers' trial is set for next month, and I'm preparing to testify, of course. I hope that seeing justice served will bring me some peace, but I can't help but worry. What if he comes back? What if he finds another way to get to me? The fear is always there, lurking in the back of my mind. I'm telling my story here as a warning. Be careful who you trust, even if they seem harmless. And if something doesn't feel right, trust your instincts. I wish I had acted sooner, before things escalated to this point. My youngest son is autistic and 5 years old. It's very obvious that he's autistic. He constantly stims with his hands, rocks back and forth, and doesn't respond to communication. He's a Gestalt language processor, so he repeats catchphrases that only I can understand. For instance, he will say "whittle wobbles" when he has a hole in his sock. Saturday, I took him and my daughter, who's 8, to the park. A man probably in his mid to late 30s was there with who he said was his niece. Her and my daughter hit it off, so he came over to talk to me. My son is in his own little world, but playing on the equipment from time to time, and he hits himself in the head, so I constantly have to redirect him. The man asks if my son is autistic and I say yes. He then asked when he was diagnosed, and I told him at the age of 2, almost 3. He asked if he's in regular classes or special needs, and I don't answer him right away because I'm getting uncomfortable. He can tell, and he responds with, "See, I think my nephew is autistic and he's 3. So I let my guard down a little, which was the wrong decision. I tell him that he's in a special needs class. He asks what school because he wants to know options for his nephew. I hesitated, and I then tell him the 4 schools in the district that offer a special needs class, not specifying which school my son goes to. Then he asks if my son runs off a lot. I just reply sometimes, and he notices the GPS tracker on my son's ankle. He asks how well that tracks him, and if he ever tries to take it off. At this point, I realize that this is not a conversation I want to have. I then tell him that I am not comfortable talking to him about this anymore. He responds with, "Oh, I'm just concerned about my nephew." I tell him not all autistic children are the same and that he should get him evaluated. I call my daughter over, who is now upset because she was having fun playing with a little girl, and then I pick up my son and then we go to the car. I'm just watching him as we leave and he's just staring at us. My daughter asked why we had to go, and I tell her that we have to go home and do stuff around the house. She's very intuitive, and then she asks, "Is it because of that girl's stepdad?" I ask her why she thinks he was her stepdad, and she said that the little girl told her that he was her mom's boyfriend. I ask what else she said about him. She tells me that the little girl said, "He likes to talk to girls like your mom and it makes my mom mad." I then ask if there was anything else, and she tells me that the girl said she was glad she met my daughter because she's an only child and doesn't get to play with other kids except at school. She also tells me that the little girl asked for her phone number and wanted to see her again soon. This man was lying to me. For what reason, I don't know. I can only assume to make it seem like he was single. But it could be more sinister than that, though. I have no idea. I immediately call the police and tell them everything. They get my info and say that they are sending an officer to the park. And by the time the officer got to the park, maybe a couple hours later, they were, of course, gone. I give the dispatcher a description, the man and the little girl's first names, and what I think he was driving since it was just us there, so I assume that it was his vehicle in the lot. They then tell me that they will call if they need any more information. A lesson learned. I'm almost certain that he took advantage of my willingness to help another autistic person to try to get information about my son or about me. Update. The man has been found and arrested. My brother shared my story with his friend, who is a sheriff's deputy in the county to the south of me. They had gotten similar reports about a man matching the same description. One report included him allegedly trying to lure a disabled toddler away from his mother at a trampoline park. They had a video and his license plate this time. My brother's friend sent me the guy's mugshot and asked if this was the man. And it was the man. My brother's friend was investigating the trampoline park incident, but since it was a different county, he didn't know of my report until my brother shared it with him. I asked about the girl that was with him, and he couldn't tell me anything other than she's safe. They arrested him in a county almost 2 hours away from me yesterday. I found out his full name, and I looked up all his charges. He had a warrant in the state to the north of me for so many things, including stalking, violating a protective order, and child endangerment. And now, new charges due to the trampoline park incident. Since nothing technically illegal happened in my situation, he won't have charges brought against him for that. But my story may be needed for his case. I'm not a lawyer or law enforcement, so I don't know specifics on how or why, but maybe to show a trend of his behavior? Or maybe targeting disabled children. When I find out more, I'll update it here. But parents, trust your instincts. I know some comments think I went too far calling the police, but in this case, I am confident now that I did not. Who knows how many times he may have done this, but it went unreported. Hi everyone, my name is Emily, and I'm 16 years old. I live in a small picturesque town in Pacific Northwest where towering evergreen trees line the streets, and the air always smells fresh and crisp. My town is the kind of place where everyone knows each other and it's usually very safe. I have a part-time job at a local diner, which is about a 15-minute walk from my house. Despite my busy schedule, I always look forward to the walk home. It was my time to unwind, enjoy the cool evening air, and clear my head after a shift. The route I take home is pretty straightforward. I leave the diner, cut through a small park that's well lit by street lamps, and then I walk through a residential area filled with cozy houses, manicured lawns, and the occasionally friendly neighbor waving hello. I've always felt safe walking home even at night, and it's become a routine that I cherish. One evening after my shift ended at around 9 p.m., I started my usual walk home. The sun had set, but the streets were illuminated by the soft glow of the streetlights. As I left the park and entered the residential area, I noticed a man walking a short distance behind me. He was tall and lanky, wearing a dark hoodie with a hood up, jeans, and some worn-out sneakers. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, and his head was slightly lowered, making it hard to see his face. At first, I really didn't think much of it. People walked their dogs or went for evening strolls all the time in my neighborhood. But as I continued down the street, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was getting closer to me. I quickened my pace, hoping he would just continue on his way, but then he matched my speed. My heart started to race and I could feel the panic rising in me. I tried to stay calm and rationalize the situation. Maybe he was just going the same way I was. Maybe he wasn't following me at all. But my instincts were screaming at me to be cautious. I turned a corner hoping to lose him, but he was still there trailing behind me. My mind raced with thoughts of what to do. Should I run? Should I scream? I didn't want to overreact, but every instinct was telling me that I was in danger. As I walked faster, I noticed the man closing the distance between us. I could feel his eyes on me, and it sent chills down my spine. Suddenly, he called out and said, "Hey, wait up! I just want to talk to you." His voice was rough and unsettling. I didn't respond and I just kept moving, but he persisted. He said, "Hey, don't be scared. I just want to ask you something." Panic surged through me, and I decided to make a break for it. I sprinted down the street, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear his footsteps quickening behind me. I darted through a narrow alley, hoping to shake him off, but he followed still, his breathing heavy and labored. I emerged from the alley and found myself in another residential street, but it was quieter and there were fewer streetlights. I looked around desperately for help, but the houses were dark and no one seemed to be outside. I spotted a convenience store at the end of the street and I made a beeline for it, hoping that it was still open. As I neared the store, I glanced over my shoulder and I saw the man still pursuing me, his face now visible under the streetlights. His eyes were wild and his mouth was twisted into a sinister grin. I burst into the convenience store, startling the cashier who was stocking shelves. "Please, help me! Someone's following me!" I gasped, my voice trembling. The cashier quickly locked the door and called the police. I hid behind the counter, peeking out to see if the man was still there. He had stopped outside the store, staring through the windows with a look of frustration. After a few tense moments, he turned and then walked away, disappearing into the night. The police arrived shortly afterward, and I gave them a description of the man and what had happened. They promised to patrol the area more frequently and advised me to be cautious. My parents were contacted, and then they came to pick me up. I could see the worry in their eyes as they hugged me tightly, and I felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. For weeks, I was terrified to walk home alone. My parents arranged for someone to pick me up after my shifts, and I couldn't help but look over my shoulder everywhere I went. The man never showed up again, but the fear remained. I kept seeing his face in my mind, and the memory of his sinister grin haunted me. One night, I was closing up at the diner when I noticed a familiar figure standing across the street. My blood ran cold as I recognized the man who had followed me. He was leaning against a lamppost, casually smoking a cigarette, his eyes fixed on the diner. I quickly locked the door and then called my dad, who told me to stay put and that he was on his way. As I waited, I tried to keep an eye on the man without drawing attention to myself. He seemed more relaxed this time, almost as if he was toying with me. My dad arrived within minutes, and the man disappeared again before the police could be called. The following day, my parents and I went to the police station to update the report. The officers assured us that they would increase their patrols, but there wasn't much that they could do without more information. I felt helpless and frustrated, but I knew I had to be strong and vigilant. I changed my routine, taking different routes home and always making sure that I was with someone I trusted. My friends and coworkers were supportive, and they helped me feel more secure. I also started carrying pepper spray and took a self-defense class to feel more prepared. Despite these precautions, I just couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I saw a shadow or heard footsteps behind me, my heart would race and I'd be on high alert. I became more cautious about what I shared on social media, not wanting to give away any information about my whereabouts. One Saturday evening, I decided to meet up with a group of friends at a local cafe. It was a rare night off and I wanted to enjoy myself and try to forget about the man who had been stalking me. We laughed and chatted, and for a while, I felt like a normal teenager again. As the night wore on, I excused myself to go to the restroom. But when I came back, I noticed the man sitting alone at a table near the entrance. It was him! My heart pounded in my chest and I felt a wave of nausea. He was watching me with that same sinister grin, and I knew that I had to leave. I whispered to my friends that I needed to go, and they quickly gathered their things to come with me. We left the cafe together and I could feel his gaze burning into my back as we walked away. One of my friends suggested that we go to their house instead, which was nearby, and then call the police from there. As we walked, I glanced over my shoulder and saw the man trailing us behind at a distance. My friends noticed it too, and we quickened our pace, trying to lose him in the maze of residential streets. We turned corner after corner, hoping that he would give up, but he persisted. We finally reached my friend's house and then rushed inside, locking the door behind us. We peered out the window to see if he was still following, but he had vanished once again. We called the police and they arrived shortly afterward to take our statements and then search the area, but again and again, they could not find any trace of him. The police advised me to be extra cautious and to change my routines as much as possible. They promised to keep an eye on the area and follow up on any leads. I felt a sense of relief knowing that they were taking my situation seriously, but the fear still lingered. With the support of my friends, family, and the police, I began to regain some sense of normalcy. I continued to work at the diner, but I always made sure someone was with me when I walked home or went out. The memory of the man's sinister grin still haunted me, but I refused to let it control my life. Months passed, and although I never saw the man again, I remained vigilant. I shared my experience with others to raise awareness and remind them to trust their instincts and stay safe. The fear may never completely go away, but I've learned to be stronger and more cautious because of it. Always trust your instincts. It's easy to dismiss your fears, but it's better to be safe. than sorry. Hi everyone. This is something that happened to me that has deeply shaken me, but I would like to get it off my chest, so here it goes. I'm Lisa, and I'm using a fake name, but I'm a 22-year-old social media influencer. I live in an upscale home in a quiet neighborhood. I don't want to share the location or even an idea of where it is because I'm just scared. My life might have looked perfect online, but the truth is far from it. I wanted to share my story to remind everyone to be careful about what they share or post online and who they trust. I started my social media journey a few years ago, posting about beauty tips, fashion, and just the daily life because I was very interested in those things. I think I got it from my mom, and if this situation didn't happen to me, I would have loved to share my account with you, but now I can't. I started small, of course, but my following grew rapidly, and I started to make a decent living from sponsorships and ads. It was a dream come true to be able to do the things I love and to earn from it at the same time. But it also came with its downsides. The constant pressure to post, the invasive questions from followers, and, as I would come to learn, the risk of attracting the wrong kind of attention. About 10 months ago, I started noticing strange messages in my DMs on Instagram. At first, they were harmless compliments and questions, but one user, his name was Alex, stood out. His messages were more frequent, and he seemed to know a lot about my life. I checked his account, and he doesn't seem like a bot or something like that. He had like 3 photos of himself on there, and the rest were random shots. He was a guy who looked to be in his late 30s to his early 40s. He had dark hair and a chunky build. He looked to be around 6 foot tall. I assumed that he was just a dedicated fan and didn't think much of it, so I just ignored his messages. That was my first mistake. Things escalated when I received a message from Alex saying, "I saw you at the coffee shop today. You looked even more beautiful in person." My blood ran cold. I hadn't posted about going to the coffee shop that day. I was about to, of course, but how did he know? I brushed it off as a coincidence, thinking maybe he saw me there because he was getting his coffee too. But deep down, I was feeling uneasy. A week later, I come home to find a bouquet of roses on my doorstep. There was no note on it, but I had a sinking feeling it was from Alex. I'm not sure why. I posted a thank you message on my socials, also addressing this mystery person who gave it, hoping that it was from a friend or from a brand, and that I just made a mistake thinking it was from Alex. But that night, I received a message from Alex saying, "Did you like the roses? I know they're your favorite." Panic then set in. I had never mentioned my favorite flowers online, or maybe I did, but I don't remember. But the issue is, how did he know my address? Out of all the things that I post, my address was not one of it. I decided to ignore Alex's messages, hoping that he would just lose interest and just stop. But that only seemed to make him more persistent. The messages became more intense, ranging from declarations of love to threats like, "If you don't respond to me, I will come to your house again." One message read. Another said, "You can't ignore me forever, Lisa." This really disturbed me. I showed the messages to my friends and my family, who urged me to go to the police, and I tried to file a report, but without knowing who Alex really was and not having enough proof, as they said, there wasn't much they could do. I felt trapped. I didn't want to leave my house at all or share any information about me online. so I stopped posting stories and photos and many more. I just wanted to crawl into a wall and hide in my room. One late afternoon, I had to go out and buy some supplies and groceries. I asked my mom to meet me at the store because I didn't want to be there by myself. Nothing happened the whole day though, and I started to relax. When it was time to go home, it was dark, but I felt a bit confident, so I didn't ask my mom to accompany me, and I assured her that I would be fine for the night. But when I got home, I saw a note taped on my door, and it read, "I'm inside. Come and find me, Lisa." I ran back to my car and I locked it. My heart raced as I dialed 911, and my hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold the phone. The operator stayed on the line with me until the police arrived. They searched the house, and they found Alex hiding in my basement. He was arrested, and after some investigation, the police told me that he had been following me for months, not just online, but physically, and that he was tracking my every move through my social media post. Alex's arrest brought some relief, but I just couldn't shake the fear. I decided to quit from social media, find another job, and just focus on my well-being. I moved in with a friend for a while, but I couldn't afford to break my lease, so eventually I had to return home. I'm still in therapy trying to cope with the anxiety and fear that lingers, but I'm sharing my story here as a warning. Be mindful of what you share online and who you interact with. It's easy to forget that not everyone has good intentions. And to Alex, who stalked me and messed up my life, you took away my peace of mind, and I will continue to fight every day to get it back. So, let's not meet ever again. I used to work at a certain 24-hour diner that serves waffles. The House of Waffles, if you will. And honestly, it was probably one of the best jobs that I have ever had. I worked the night shift, and the manager on that shift was super laid back. So as long as we kept the line clean and the customers happy, we were pretty well allowed to do whatever we wanted. Of course, within reason. On the night where this happened, it was a rather busy and stressful night, which did happen from time to time. I just come off my shift, so it was around 3 in the morning, I believe. And after having served about 150 waffles that night, I was pretty well ready to get home and then go to bed. The employee parking lot was a small cramped space off to the back of the diner. It was large enough for only a few cars, and if you worked a full shift, you usually had to park in the front of the building. I had gotten one of the closer spots in the back lot. It was a bit tucked off at the side and a bit darker than the rest of the lot. But it felt secure enough. Plus, it was an employee lot, so it was surely safer than being out in the main lot with everyone else. Right? Yeah, that was the night that I learned that was completely wrong. As I approached my car, keys in hand, ready to hit the unlock button, hop in and then head home, I noticed something odd. There was another car that was haphazardly parked in the employee lot. Like they weren't parked in the lot, but off to the side and behind another person's car. I paused and I sort of stared at it for a moment, thinking that it was really strange. As I was staring at it, I heard the engine turn over and the headlights kicked on. I just kind of thought that it was someone doing something that they probably shouldn't have been. And they saw me and realized that it wasn't as hidden as they thought. I shrugged it off, thinking that they would just go ahead and leave, and I kept on toward my car. As I got to my car, I reached my hand in my pocket to grab my phone, only to realize that I didn't have it. I had accidentally left it inside. I huffed a bit at my stupidity, shut my door, and started back toward the back entrance of the restaurant. As I was walking back, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the man getting out of his car that was now sitting there idling. I only saw him out of the corner of my eye, but I knew that he was there. I knew that he was walking toward me, and I was now extremely nervous. I picked up my pace, but the man started shouting for me to hold on, that he wanted to talk to me. He was, unfortunately, faster than I was, and he caught up to me, grabbing my arm. As he grabbed me, I started screaming, and I reached out and banged on the back of the door as hard as I could, trying to pull away from his grip. I kept screaming and trying to hit or kick the door to get anyone's attention, but he kept pulling me away from the door, and I was near certain that this was the end for me. This guy was going to get me in his car and then drive off. Thankfully, that wasn't what happened, and my banging on the door was enough to catch the attention of our cook. To describe our cook is to describe the most intimidating man that I have ever seen, though, knowing him, I know that he's also the most kind-hearted giant ever. Andre was a 6.5-foot tall man that had to be around 300 pounds. And while Andre had a bit of fat on him from eating the food at our diner, he also liked to hit the weights, and under that slight chubbiness was a ton of muscle. So when he threw the door open and was holding a hammer and then came out shouting at the man that had a hold of me, we both jumped. The man took one look at Andre, let me go, and then made a mad dash back towards his car. Andre took off toward the car as the guy started to reverse out as fast as he could. I then witnessed what was probably the most terrifying thing that I have ever seen. I watched as Andre pulled his arm back and threw the hammer at the windshield. And I swear, that hammer went through the damn glass and hit the guy in the face. It definitely broke it. If not all the way, he now had a massive crushed spot on the windshield. The guy gunned it and took off out the parking lot, leaving me standing there behind Andre, who I now considered my savior. He asked me if I was okay, took me back inside, and then we contacted the police. This was the day that we all learned that the cameras in the back lot, the employee lot, didn't work. They had apparently stopped working at some point in the last year, and the owner never bothered to get them fixed. He did though after this, but it was a little too late for that. I was given a few days off after this, and when I came back, I was told to park in the closest spot, and the manager implemented a new rule that no one was allowed to walk to their cars alone. Someone had to, at the very least, be at the door and watch them get in their car at the end of the shift. I don't work there anymore. Andre does, and he's officially my best friend at this point because that man most likely saved my life. And watching him throw a hammer through a windshield was something else. I have no idea if they caught the guy, but I never heard from them. If nothing else, hopefully Andre scared the hell out of them, and they learned their lesson. Hi everyone. I've been thinking about sharing this experience for a while now, but I never knew where to share it or even if it's worth sharing. I think on the surface of it, it's probably not that creepy, but it was the first time in my life where I got that, "Oh, this doesn't feel right," feeling in my gut. I was about 5 or 6 years old when this happened, and I'm 31 now, but I remember it as clear as day. For some background, I lived at the time in a small cul-de-sac in England. At the end of our road was a row of shops, and often people would park at the end of the road when there is no parking outside the shops. There was a row of terraced houses with a patch of grass outside, and on this grass there was a small wall that had a sign on it just saying that it was private parking beyond that point. This day, a friend and I, both young girls, were sat on this wall, facing the end of the road, just chatting and people watching. While we were sat there, a red car parks at the end of the road on the right-hand side, probably about 10 meters or so away. A man then gets out of the car, and he's slightly older than middle age from what I can remember. Immediately, the second that he gets out of the car, before he even takes a single step, he gets out a camera and then takes a photo of us sat on the wall. Now, this is the late 90s, so this is just a disposable camera. After that, he starts walking across the road, and as he gets halfway across the road, he stops, and then he takes another photo of us, and then he keeps going. As soon as he gets to the pavement on the other side of the road, he again stops and takes another photo. Then, he continues walking in the direction of the shops. I remember asking my friend what he was doing, but I can't really remember anything else about what we said. I think we just shrugged it off and kept talking about whatever that it was we were talking about before. A little while goes by, and then the man returns. And then he does it again. He stops on the pavement right before crossing the road and takes a photo of us. He keeps walking, gets halfway across the road, and takes another photo of us. He then keeps walking and then takes a final photo of us right before he gets in his car. At no point during any of this interaction does he say a single word to us. He never asked to take our photo, say hello, or wave or smile. No, nothing. Just completely silent and straight-faced and taking photos. At this point, I think we both get this bad feeling. I, for sure, do, and I run inside to tell our parents. I didn't even know what it was that I was feeling, being so young and all. I just knew that this didn't feel good, and my gut was screaming at me that I needed to tell someone about this. I half expected my parents to tell us that we were being silly, but they looked shocked and immediately called the police. I remember the police coming and us telling them the story, and they looked concerned, which, again, I didn't really expect. I knew it felt wrong, but I also thought that because he just left and didn't do anything, and it wasn't really illegal to take photos, that we would be told off making a fuss of it. Again, I was only very young, so even though I knew it felt weird, I didn't know why. I remember the police leaving and saying that they would keep us updated, but I don't remember anything happening after that, which isn't that surprising. I'm sure our description of the man wasn't that good, and we didn't know about getting number plates or anything like that. I have thought of this incident on and off throughout my life as a weird thing that happened. Of course, now, as an adult, I understand more why it was really weird that this man was taking photos of really young girls back then. Still, I try and rationalize it in my brain. Is it really that creepy? Maybe he just thought that it was a nice image. 2 girls hanging out in the middle of summer. But even writing that, it feels weird to me. But of course, nothing actually ever happened to us, and I never saw that man again. We weren't kidnapped or worse, so maybe it was innocent? What makes it hard for me to consider it as a slightly weird but innocent encounter is the fact that he never spoke or even acknowledged us. I think it would be super weird anyway for a random man to ask to take a photo of little girls. But the fact that he didn't say a single thing was weird. Also, I find it so weird that he didn't just take 1 photo, but like 6. Like he was trying to get the perfect shot. It's weird to me that I have no idea what happened to those photos. I would love your opinion on this. Is it creepy, or am I just over-exaggerating the situation? Like I said, it ended up perfectly fine. Nobody got hurt. Why do you think this man took the photos? I'm a 28-year-old female who lives in a small town called Fairview, nestled near the Mississippi River in the Midwest. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, and you can't walk down the main street without running into at least a few familiar faces. I've always felt safe here, cocooned in the comfort of our tight-knit community. That all changed for me a few months ago, and I still get chills thinking about what happened. Fairview is your typical picturesque town. We have charming little coffee shops, a beautiful park by the river, and an old-fashioned movie theater that still shows black and white films on the weekends. I work in one of the few office buildings downtown, a nondescript job that pays well enough to afford my cozy apartment. Life was pretty uneventful, really, until I started noticing a strange car parked outside my building multiple nights a week. At first, I thought that it was just a coincidence. Maybe someone had a new boyfriend or girlfriend who was over frequently, or perhaps someone in the building had a new car that I hadn't seen before. But as the weeks went by, I grew more uneasy. The car, a dark blue sedan with tinted windows, was there almost every night when I got home from work. It was always parked in the same spot, directly across from my apartment building, and it never seemed to move. One night, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to walk by the car on my way to the entrance. As I approached, I glanced inside, but I saw nothing but darkness. The windows were too tinted to see if anyone was inside. But a chill suddenly ran down my spine, and I quickly made my way inside, locking my door behind me. A few days later, I was in the break room at work chatting with my friend Jenny. She noticed that I seemed distracted and asked what was wrong. I told her about the car and how uneasy it makes me feel. She said, "That sounds kind of creepy. Maybe you should report it to the police?" I sighed and said, "Maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure if there's even a problem. I don't know why it makes me uneasy. I just don't want to make a big deal out of nothing." That evening, as I walked to my car in the office parking lot, I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me. I glanced around, but I didn't see anyone. My heart raced as I hurried to my car and drove home, checking my rear-view mirror the entire way. When I got home, the dark blue sedan was there again, parked in its usual spot. My hands trembled as I unlocked my apartment door and I bolted it behind me. I decided that it was time to call the police. The dispatcher was polite and took down all the details, but it was pretty obvious that they didn't take me seriously. I mean, it makes sense that there would be a car parked there. It was either a new car from my neighbor or just someone who's with them in general. But what doesn't make sense is how disturbed or uncomfortable it made me. It was like it was there because of me and that someone was watching me. That night, I barely slept, jumping at every little sound that I hear. The next morning, though, I found a note slipped under my door. It was written in neat block letters and simply said, "I see you." My blood ran cold. I knew it. I knew something was going on. I knew I wasn't just crazy. I rushed to my phone and I called the police again, showing the note to the officer who arrived. He promised to keep an eye on the area and told me to stay vigilant. Days turned into weeks, and the blue sedan continued its nightly vigil. Then, the messages started appearing in my social media inbox. It was anonymous and unsettling messages. They ranged from simple greetings to ominous warnings like, "I'm watching you." Another one said, "You can't hide from me, you know." I showed the messages to the police, but they said that there wasn't much that they could do without knowing who was behind them. I felt trapped, constantly looking over my shoulder, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. But one night, after a late shift at work, I noticed the blue sedan following me home. My heart pounded as I tried to lose it, taking random turns and doubling back, but it stayed right behind me, its headlights glaring into my rearview mirror. I pulled into my apartment complex, and then I sprinted to my door, fumbling with my keys in my panic. As I reached my door, I heard footsteps behind me, and I turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. It was a man, tall and dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by a hood. I screamed, and I managed to get inside luckily, and I slammed the door shut just as he reached it. I called the police and they arrived within minutes, but the man was gone. They found the blue sedan abandoned a few blocks away, but there was no trace of the stalker. The police advised me to stay somewhere else for a while, so I moved in with my friend. I couldn't shake the fear though. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every little noise. But eventually, they caught the man. He turned out to be a former coworker who had become obsessed with me. He was arrested and charged with stalking and harassment. I've seen the guy around at work a couple of times, but we didn't really have any interactions other than saying hi, hello. And when I didn't see him again, I just assumed he quit and didn't think about it. Even though that he was behind bars right now, I just couldn't stay in Fairview. The place that had always felt like home now felt tainted, filled with memories of fear and unease. So I decided to move to a new city, hoping to find a fresh start and some peace of mind. If you ever feel like something is off, trust your instincts. Don't wait until it's too late. And to my ex-coworker, let's not meet again.
And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared, because your fear feeds me.